I am Shanfei. I used to be the sharpest saber in China, but now I am trapped in the quagmire of post-war syndrome and just want to die. The former soldier king, now a useless man, facing the anger of his superiors, he only feels hopeless about life. Until a photo and an unknown secret rekindled the fire in his heart. He has a daughter. He who originally wanted to die, suddenly became full of desire for the future. So he bid farewell to the army and embarked on a journey to find his daughter. Hi everyone, don't forget to leave feedback and enjoy the story.
Shenfei.
The old leader called softly when Shenfei walked out. Shenfei turned around and looked at the old man. Live well, said the old man. Shenfei couldn't help but feel a lump in his throat when he heard this. From now on, there will be no more heavenly sword in this world. Looking at Shenfei's leaving back, the old man smiled. Child, live well. It's worth it for me to protect you once. From today on, all records about Tian Dao will be erased. On the plain, he met a hot-tempered beauty, and a battle of wits and courage between enemies began. Now Shenfei is only trying to find his long-lost daughter. On the flight to Shanghai, he held the photo and laughed foolishly, completely ignoring the beautiful woman next to him. The woman was disturbed by his continuous whispering, and finally couldn't stand it anymore, took off her sunglasses and glared at him. However, Shenfei didn't care, but teased her that she had double eyelids. The woman was so angry that she raised her foot and stepped hard, but Shenfei easily dodged it. This confrontation made the woman angry, but Shenfei just swept away all the food like a whirlwind. After a full meal, he snored contentedly, and the woman was so angry that she almost collapsed and decided to teach him a lesson. However, her plan failed again. As a former soldier king, Shenfei easily resolved her revenge, leaving her with an embarrassed and unwilling expression. Shenfei easily won this small battle on the flight, but it also makes people curious. What kind of reversal will this former soldier king experience in his fight against fate? Chapter 2. I am an experienced driver. Shenfei and Yao Ruoshue's encounter at the airport was full of sparks. Yao Ruoshue tried to tease Shenfei many times, but was counterattacked every time. Outside the airport, Yao Ruoshue tried to drive away Shenfei, but she didn't expect Shenfei to jump into the car easily. Along the way, Shenfei drove wildly and stepped on the accelerator, making Yao Ruoshue carsick. Finally, the car stopped in front of Tianhua International Company. Shenfei smiled and thanked Yao Ruoshue for the ride, which made Yao Ruoshue angry, but she could do nothing about it. Yao Ruoshue entered the company. She is the president of Tianhua International. Although she is young, she has a net worth of tens of billions. If this calf works at Tianhua International, Yao Ruoshue swears that she must make this bastard suffer a lot. Even the person who hired this guy will be laid off. What kind of vision did he have to recruit such a bastard into the company? No, I'm waiting for others. Shenfei shook his head. Yao Ruoshue couldn't help but feel a little disappointed when she heard this. She snorted coldly, took the suitcase off the car, pulled the suitcase, and entered Tianhua International. Shenfei watched Yao Ruoshue leave. This girl actually worked at Tianhua International. He didn't know if she knew that woman. However, he had offended her today. Even if she knew her, this girl probably wouldn't tell him the truth. He took out a photo from his pocket. The photo was taken recently. Obviously, Su Lianqing had always lived under the surveillance of Tian Dao. That year, he was performing a mission in Shanghai and rescued Su Lianqing, who was drugged in a bar. Because time was too urgent, he helped Su Lianqing in his own way. The glaring red streak on the bedsheet is still clear in my mind when I think about it now. Because of this, Shenfei left all his savings and a letter, roughly explaining the whole story. However, he did not expect that the woman would become pregnant from then on. And that silly woman actually gave birth to a child, and because of this, she remained single for 5 years. 5 years? How many 5 years are there in a lifetime? 5 years have transformed a young girl into a young lady. Although this society is open enough, a single mother will inevitably have to endure rumors. If this woman was already married, or was a woman who led a dissolute life, it would be fine. However, this woman has remained a virgin for the past 5 years. This is enough to make Shenfei feel infinitely guilty. However, now that I am back, anyone who bullies my women or my daughter must die. A hint of hostility flashed across Shenfei's eyes. Chapter 3. Wife. Time passed quietly. The blazing morning sun gradually sank to the west, leaving only the last ray of afterglow. Shenfei stood in front of Tianhua International, with cigarette butts all over the floor. He looked up, his eyes passed through the crowd, and finally locked onto a familiar figure, Su Lianqing. The events of 5 years ago were still vivid in her mind. Because of that night, she has been lonely ever since and has become an unmarried mother. Shinfei couldn't help but walk to the path that Su Lianqing had to pass. His heart was surging, full of guilt and excitement. However, when Su Lianqing asked him if he had anything to do, Shinfei suddenly hesitated. Facing her, could he confess his past? Would she forgive him? In the end, he just shook his head and turned away silently. Su Lianqing looked at the strange man's back, confused, but soon put it behind her and drove away. Shinfei watched her go away, determined in his heart that even if they couldn't recognize each other, he would still protect her silently. He stopped a taxi and prepared to go to a new destination. However, the driver in the car was a wonderful man who kept talking about women along the way, which made Shinfei quite helpless. After arriving at Tianfu Garden, Shinfei was mistaken by the driver as a bully passenger who had no money to pay the fare. He patiently explained that he needed to withdraw money to pay, but the driver did not believe him and even suspected that Shinfei was a thief who came to make a fortune. As the two were arguing, Shinfei suddenly heard a familiar whistle. He turned around and saw that it was Yao Ruoxue. The two met again. Yao Ruoxue was helpless and felt that her luck was terrible. She met this man who gave her a headache again. Just when she was about to ignore Shinfei and leave, Shinfei shouted in a hurry, "Hey, wife!" Yao Ruoxue was speechless. Shinfei actually called her wife in public. This was simply ridiculous. Before she could react, Shinfei quickly grabbed her arm with a scoundrel smile on his face. "Let go. If you don't let go, I'll call the police." Yao Ruoxue threatened coldly. The driver looked at the scene in front of him with a look of astonishment on his face, thinking, this beautiful woman who looked like a fairy was actually this boy's wife? Shinfei approached Yao Ruoxue and begged in a low voice, "I don't have money for the taxi. Can you help me to pay for it?" Yao Ruoxue was furious and wanted to leave immediately. "Wife, we are a family. Why are you angry? How about I kneel on the washboard for you when I get home?" Shinfei said this shamelessly, turned around and ran into the community, leaving behind Yao Ruoxue with an angry face and the confused driver uncle. Faced with the driver's entanglement, Yao Ruoxue had no choice but to take out 120 yuan to pay the fare, and secretly swore in her heart, if she saw Shinfei again, she would never let him go. But fate seemed to be against her. Just when she thought she had finally gotten rid of this bastard, Shinfei appeared in front of her again and affectionately called her wife. Shinfei ran into the community, found his destination, and rang the doorbell. The person who opened the door was a young and pure beauty named Ouyang Feifei. When she saw Shinfei, her expression instantly turned cold. Shinfei didn't understand, but he didn't care. He asked if he had found the right address. "I saw you downstairs just now," Ouyang Feifei said calmly, but her attitude was as cold as ice. Shinfei looked embarrassed, secretly cursing himself for being so shameless that he couldn't even afford the taxi fare. Just when he was feeling embarrassed, Ouyang Cheng, Ouyang Feifei's father, appeared in the living room. When he saw Shinfei, he instantly showed an excited expression on his face and quickly invited Shinfei to come in. Ouyang Cheng's attitude surprised Ouyang Feifei. She couldn't understand why her father was so respectful to this poor young man and even lit a cigarette for him personally. For her father, who was always arrogant, this was simply incredible. Ouyang Feifei was full of doubts. Who exactly was this seemingly insignificant guy? Chapter 4: Shameless Man. Ouyang Feifei couldn't stand her father's respectful attitude towards Shinfei. After making tea, she was about to go back to her room, but her father scolded her to sit down. She was full of doubts. Shinfei was just a retired soldier. Why was her father so polite to him? Just find a job, security guard, cleaner, preferably in Tianxue International, Shinfei said lightly, as if he really didn't care about a high position. Ouyang Feifei was even more shocked when she heard this. Who was this person? How could he be so unconventional? Ouyang Cheng agreed to Shinfei's request and took the initiative to invite him to stay at home for a few days. Faced with her father's strong retention, Ouyang Feifei was even more confused. She even began to suspect that Shinfei was her father's illegitimate son. But even so, she was still full of hostility towards Shinfei. After taking a shower, Shinfei sat on the sofa and leisurely ate Ouyang Feifei's snacks, completely ignoring her cold attitude. Seeing Shinfei's familiar appearance, Ouyang Feifei felt indignant, but she could do nothing about it. When Ouyang Cheng sent a text message saying that he would not be home tonight, Ouyang Feifei finally found a chance for revenge. She deliberately told Shinfei that no one was at home to cook and asked him to solve it himself. Unexpectedly, Shinfei calmly said that he could cook and asked where the kitchen was. Ouyang Feifei was stunned. This guy who looked so nonchalant could actually cook? She originally thought that Shen Fei would be left hungry, but she didn't expect that the development of the matter was completely beyond her expectations. How many skills did this man have that she didn't know about? Chapter 5. Meet again. Can you do it? Don't blow up the kitchen. Ouyang Feifei looked at Shen Fei with suspicion, but her heart was infected by his confidence. She casually pointed in the direction of the kitchen. Ouyang Feifei stood at the kitchen door, suspecting that Shen Fei could only cook simple meals. However, she was completely shocked when she saw Shen Fei quickly and skillfully peeling and shredding potatoes, and finishing a plate of shredded potatoes in just 3 minutes. Is the knife skill okay? Shen Fei asked with a smile. Ouyang Feifei couldn't help but tremble in her heart. How could she have a good impression of this bastard? A delicious dinner was quickly prepared. Shen Fei ate it with big mouthfuls while casually inviting Ouyang Feifei to eat with him. She wanted to refuse, but she was so hungry that she finally sat down. In the subsequent conversation, Ouyang Feifei tentatively asked about Shen Fei's past, but found that he seemed unwilling to talk more. She was full of doubts. What secrets did this man have? There was no conversation that night. The next day, Ouyang Cheng took Shen Fei to Tianxue International and happened to meet Yao Ruoxue. The two looked at each other and were immediately furious. Is it you, bastard? It's you, silly girl? Such a tacit scolding actually opened a new round of war. Chapter 6 Onboarding. Yes, of course I know him. Yao Ruoxue stared at Shen Fei with gritted teeth, anger almost bursting out of her eyes. The two looked at each other as if a war was about to break out. Ouyang Cheng smiled awkwardly, trying to ease the atmosphere. Niece Ruoxue, this is a relative of mine who wants to find a job in your company. What do you think? Shen Fei knew that he had offended Yao Ruoxue, but in the face of her sneer, he unexpectedly remained calm. Finally, he scratched his head and said helplessly, I'm good at fighting. How about I be your bodyguard? Yao Ruoxue sneered and decided to give him a warning. If you want to be a bodyguard, you must prove yourself first. Come with me. The two came to the gym, where a dozen strong men were training. Yao Ruoxue looked at Shen Fei provocatively. If you beat them, you can stay. Shen Fei curled his lips in disdain, but still agreed to the challenge. The fight started. Shen Fei attacked quickly. Each strike was accurate and powerful. Within a few minutes, all those self-righteous strong men were knocked to the ground by him. Shen Fei clapped his hands and said disdainfully, a bunch of trash. Yao Ruoxue was stunned. She didn't expect this bastard to be so powerful. She had to admit Shen Fei's strength and nodded reluctantly. Okay, you passed. Go to the Human Resources Department to complete the entry procedures. The position will be posted in the Security Department. Shen Fei smiled proudly. Beauty. Where is the Human Resources Department? Call me CEO. Yao Ruoxue glared at him fiercely, pointed in a direction, and turned away. She secretly swore to herself that she would find an opportunity to teach this guy a lesson. Chapter 7 Debt. After Yao Ruoxue left, Lao Lu quietly approached Shen Fei, as if he wanted to ask something, but under Shen Fei's sharp gaze, his words choked. He realized that the person in front of him was not simple and retreated with a dry laugh. Shen Fei followed the instructions and came to the Human Resources Department. He knocked on the door and a charming woman named Luo Ningyan appeared in front of him. After Shen Fei introduced himself, Luo Ningyan laughed and teased him, and doubted his qualifications for the job. After all, he only had a junior high school diploma. Shen Fei had no choice but to use his specialties, fighting and bed skills, which made Luo Ningyan laugh and cry. After completing the formalities, Shen Fei found that his salary was only 800 yuan, and he immediately jumped up and felt that he was being fooled. After leaving the HR department, Shen Fei came to Yao Ruoxue's office with a cold face, but was immediately discouraged by her words. Yesterday's speeding fine plus taxi fare is 3,320 yuan. Shen Fei felt guilty and cursed himself in his heart. At noon, Yao Ruoxue saw Shen Fei eating in the cafeteria and couldn't help but laugh. This guy is such a glutton. She asked Luo Ningyan, did you set his salary? Luo Ningyan smiled and nodded, feeling secretly happy. A salary of 800 yuan was really a wonderful revenge. Chapter 8 Vomited again. Luo Ningyan and Yao Ruoxue, two cold and beautiful female CEOs, are usually the kind of people that people dare not approach in the company. However, on this day, the two of them suddenly became close and laughed because of a common goal, to kill Shen Fei. Seeing their changes, the male employees in the company were stunned, and they couldn't believe that these two cold and beautiful goddesses actually had such a side. Shen Fei was indignant and secretly vowed to teach these two witches a lesson one day. However, life was not as simple as he imagined. Under the oppression of the two CEOs, his life became more and more difficult, and even eating became a problem. Yao Ruoxue seemed to see his predicament and offered to raise his salary, but the condition was that it depended on his performance. Xin Fei knew that this woman was difficult to deal with, but for the sake of the meager salary, he had to bow his head. However, things always develop unexpectedly. Yao Ruoxue took Xin Fei out, but she didn't expect to torture him all the way, just to test his driving patience, and finally ended with him vomiting in the car. After arriving at the destination, Yao Ruoxue began to choose men's clothing. Xin Fei felt jealous and wondered which lucky guy these clothes were bought for. Is it bought for her father? Or for her boyfriend? How could a big CEO like Yao Ruoxue, who is busy with all kinds of things, have time to go shopping? If it wasn't for someone extremely important to her, I'm afraid he would never let her choose clothes in person. However, it seems that Yao Ruoxue only likes young styles. Thinking of this, Xin Fei couldn't help but feel a little sour. He wondered what kind of boy Yao Ruoxue, this beautiful girl, looks like. Chapter 9, Debt Collection. Xin Fei looked at Yao Ruoxue in surprise. She was holding a black suit in her hand and motioned him to try it on. Xin Fei sneered, I don't have the habit of trying on clothes for others, unless I'm paid. He thought that this was the clothes picked for Yao Ruoxue's boyfriend, and cursed himself in his heart for becoming a free model. I bought it for you. Go and try it. Yao Ruoxue said unhappily. Xin Fei was stunned, then glanced at the price tag. 4 digits. He immediately became alert. Will it not be deducted from my salary? Yao Ruoxue rolled her eyes. It's free. Go. Xin Fei tried on the suit with some doubt. When he came out, even Yao Ruoxue was shocked by his temperament. However, Xin Fei still felt uncomfortable and muttered, Boss Yao, isn't this a bit too high profile? Not high profile, being a bodyguard has to look presentable. Yao Ruoxue responded coldly. Xin Fei shrugged and followed her to the door of a company. As soon as he entered the company, Xin Fei found something wrong. The people here looked more like gangsters than ordinary employees. Yao Ruoxue was not afraid and went straight to the person in charge, Mr. Yu. The whole scene was tense. Mr. Yu made it clear that he did not intend to repay the debt and asked his men to speak rudely to Yao Ruoxue. Facing the threats from the gangsters, Yao Ruoxue calmly handed everything over to Xin Fei. Xin Fei smiled and knocked everyone to the ground in 3 minutes, leaving only Mr. Yu. Seeing this, Mr. Yu had no choice but to write a check to pay off the debt. However, when Xin Fei wanted to share the dividends with great anticipation, Yao Ruoxue only said lightly, good performance, worth 200 yuan. Xin Fei was immediately furious. He thought he could earn 20,000 yuan, but was given 200 yuan. He cursed himself in his heart for being treated as the 2 of 200. Chapter 10. Where in life do we not meet? Xin Fei looked at Yao Ruoxue helplessly. Her attitude when she threw 200 yuan at him made him a little depressed. Just when he wanted to bargain again, Yao Ruoxue made a phone call and a van drove away quickly. Xin Fei realized that this woman had already made arrangements, and he was just a spare pawn. Let's go, Mr. Yao. Can you give us a little more? Xin Fei looked at Yao Ruoxue in a flattering tone. However, Yao Ruoxue deliberately teased. Weren't you quite courageous just now? What's the point of this now? She was in a good mood. After all, she had recovered tens of millions of debts from the group, so even Xin Fei, the bastard, had made a contribution. 200 is 200. Xin Fei lowered his head helplessly and then drove, carefully avoiding every pothole. However, when returning to the company, the car still bumped at the last moment. Yao Ruoxue reminded him coldly, deduct money according to the rules. Xin Fei cursed this woman's inhumanity in his heart, but he could only admit defeat. Looking at her leaving back, he was helpless and could only vent his anger on the innocent security guard. However, Yao Ruoxue's words made him restrain his anger. After all, the threat of having his salary deducted was too great. Back in the office, Xin Fei cautiously asked if he could borrow some money for dinner, but Yao Ruoxue agreed readily and showed some tenderness, which surprised Xin Fei. However, he knew that time waits for no one, and he must go to see Su Lianqing as soon as possible. After leaving the company in a hurry, Xin Fei drove all the way and finally stopped a taxi in the parking lot and caught up with the car he had been thinking about. When the driver turned around, they were both stunned. It turned out to be the rogue driver who was blackmailed by Xin Fei for 60 yuan yesterday. Xin Fei grinned and thought to himself, life is full of encounters. Chapter 11. You're responsible for your own mistakes. The driver saw Xin Fei and smiled awkwardly. Brother, what a coincidence. He didn't expect to run into this difficult guy again. Shinfei sneered. You cheated me of 60 yuan yesterday. How much do you want to cheat today? The driver hurriedly smiled and said, how about I take you for free today? Shinfei nodded with satisfaction and ordered, follow the Bora in front, or I will complain to you. The driver had no choice but to start the car quickly. However, when the red light blocked their pursuit, Shinfei was furious. Go through? The driver said with a sad face, brother, my whole family depends on me for this job. In the end, Shinfei failed to catch up with Su Lianqing and angrily ordered the driver to take him home. When they arrived at the door of his house, the driver asked for the fare again, but Shinfei refused directly. I gave it to you yesterday, and you still want it today? The driver had no choice but to give up and watched Shinfei walk away. When Shinfei returned to Ouyang Cheng's house, it was time for dinner. Ouyang Feifei, who had always been at odds with him, actually greeted him warmly, which made Shinfei very alert. Sure enough, when Ouyang Feifei pretended to pull him to sit down, Shinfei cleverly let her sit on the chair covered with glue. After dinner, Feifei was embarrassed by her prank and moved her stool into the room. Yao Ruoxue happened to visit at this time and saw Feifei's pants stuck on the chair with a curious look on her face. Feifei complained aggrievedly and blamed everything on Shinfei. Yao Ruoxue began to doubt Shinfei's true intentions. She asked him to go outside and asked him directly, why do you want to join Manhua International? Do I have to say it? Shinfei showed a deep look on his face, and there was a hint of tenderness and sadness in his eyes. Yao Ruoxue was used to this kid laughing and scolding all day long, so she couldn't help feeling a little surprised when she suddenly saw such an expression. I have to say it, Yao Ruoxue said sternly. Chapter 12 Life is like a play. All depends on acting. Facing Yao Ruoxue, Shinfei rubbed his hands shyly and said affectionately, in fact, from the moment I took off your sunglasses on the plane, your shadow was planted in my heart. Later, I learned that you worked at Manhua International, so I asked Ouyang Chung to arrange for me to go to Manhua International, just to see you every day. His voice was low, and there was a trace of sadness in his eyes. I know I am not worthy of you, but as long as I can stay by your side, I will be satisfied. Yao Ruoxue was caught off guard by this sudden confession, and her heart was shaken. She had never heard such a sincere confession before, and her cheeks blushed slightly, but she still replied firmly, nonsense. Seeing this, Shinfei pressed the issue. Just pretend I didn't say anything. This was just my dream. You are still the high and mighty CEO, and I am just a small bodyguard. Yao Ruoxue was so confused by him that she turned around and left in a hurry. Back in the room, Shinfei faced Ouyang Feifei, feeling depressed. He decided to settle the score and pulled Ouyang Feifei over, pressed her on his legs, and gave her a severe lesson. Ouyang Feifei was so angry that she burst into tears, but she had no power to fight back. Shinfei warned, next time you dare to do something small, it won't be so easy. The next day, Ouyang Feifei looked tired, obviously having not slept all night, while Shinfei was thinking differently. Although he and Yao Ruoxue had resumed their normal relationship on the surface, he felt a little lost in his heart. At night, Shinfei missed the chance to follow Su Lianqing again and was forced to help Yao Ruoxue deal with the files. When he returned to Ouyang's house, he found that Ouyang Feifei and her friends were plotting to trick him. Sure enough, in the dead of night, Ouyang Feifei lay in bed, too excited to fall asleep, looking forward to Shinfei being scared to death. However, when she couldn't help getting up to check, she found Shinfei sitting in the room leisurely, eating meat soup, and was not teased at all. Shinfei looked up at her and asked calmly, do you want to eat together? Ouyang Feifei gnashed her teeth in anger, but she could only swallow her anger. Shinfei's calmness once again made her plan fail. She returned to her room angrily, vowing to herself that she must find an opportunity to get back on top. Chapter 13 Whose Child? Ouyang Feifei smelled the aroma of the meat soup cooked by Shinfei, and her stomach couldn't help but growl, but she hesitated for the sake of face. However, she knew Shinfei's temper, and if she was hypocritical and didn't eat, this guy would definitely not call her again. Finally, she turned and went into the kitchen, took out a bowl and a spoon, and came to Shinfei. Shinfei glanced at her and said impatiently, serve it yourself? Do you still want me to serve you? Ouyang Feifei pouted and served a bowl of meat soup. As soon as she took a bite, her eyes narrowed involuntarily. It tasted really good. As she was enjoying the meal, Shinfei casually said, you have good taste. This snake meat is really delicious. As soon as he finished speaking, Ouyang Feifei's face changed instantly. She asked in shock, what did you say? This is snake meat? Shinfei replied calmly. Yes, a snake suddenly appeared in the room, and it was made into a meat soup. Didn't you enjoy it? Ouyang Feifei suddenly felt nauseous and rushed to the bathroom. She cried in her heart. This bastard must have done it on purpose. She had released a snake in Shinfei's room last night, but she didn't expect Shinfei to turn the tables and make the snake her dinner. When she came out of the bathroom, her eyes were still filled with tears and her face was pale. Shinfei asked innocently, Did it taste so good that you cried? Ouyang Feifei glared at him fiercely, feeling helpless. At night, Shinfei stood in front of the window, looking out quietly. He took out 2 photos from his pocket, and the woman and child in the photos filled his heart with mixed emotions. He took a deep breath and silently decided in his heart that he must find Su Lianqing's residence tomorrow and see his daughter with his own eyes. The next morning, Ouyang Feifei was still pale, and she didn't even eat breakfast, which made Aunt Lan very worried. Shinfei looked relaxed and sarcastically said, Squeamish. He didn't understand Ouyang Feifei's fear of eating snake meat at all, and just thought she was too hypocritical. At work, Shinfei continued to play games leisurely until Yao Ruoxue could no longer bear it and confiscated his computer. Facing Yao Ruoxue's strong aura, Shinfei actually lost the courage to protest. In the evening, Shinfei finally tracked Su Lianqing as he wished, and saw her picking up her daughter from school. However, just as the little girl ran towards her mother, a car suddenly came speeding from the intersection. At the critical moment, Shinfei rushed over like lightning and saved the little girl. Su Lianqing was terrified. She hugged her daughter and kept comforting her, tears welling up in her eyes. Shinfei saw this and wanted to blame her, but in the end he said nothing. He realized that he had never fulfilled his responsibilities as a father, so what right did he have to blame her? However, when the owner got out of the car, he rudely accused Su Lianqing. Seeing this, Shinfei couldn't help it anymore, and he said coldly, How can you be a mother? He scared the little girl, and you apologized to him? Chapter 14 Beautiful Policewoman. After Shinfei roared, he saw Su Lianqing's pitiful appearance and felt distressed. This silly woman had suffered so much injustice over the years. Looking at the BMW driver with a cold gaze, Shinfei ordered unceremoniously, Get out of the car and apologize. The BMW driver wanted to rage again, but under Shinfei's murderous eyes, his words got stuck in his throat. Although he didn't know what murderous intent was, he felt the threat from Shinfei. However, Su Lianqing gently advised, Forget it, as long as the child is fine, don't make a fuss anymore. Shinfei frowned and said coldly, Don't apologize? Then don't blame me for being rude. The driver relied on the woman in the car and his status, and sneered provocatively, Little bastard, I didn't crush her to death. She's lucky. As soon as the voice fell, Shinfei's eyes were full of murderous intent. He suppressed his anger, looked at the little girl in Su Lianqing's arms, and asked gently, What's your name? My name is Xiaodong, Su Xiaodong. The little girl answered crisply. Shinfei showed a hint of tenderness on the corner of his mouth and whispered to Su Lianqing, Take the child back? After the mother and daughter left, Shinfei turned and walked towards the BMW, punched through the bulletproof glass, and forcibly pulled the driver out of the car. You can scold me, but if you dare to scold my family, I will not let you pay the price. Shinfei smiled grimly and punched the driver again and again. The driver was like a human sandbag under his heavy punches. Shinfei did not stop until the sirens sounded. The BMW driver was lying on the ground, with no intact flesh left. The police arrived at the scene, led by a beautiful female police officer. Seeing this scene, she said to Shinfei coldly, You are quite skilled. Not bad. Shinfei smiled indifferently. The policewoman warned him seriously, Wait until we get to the police station, and I'll deal with you. In the interrogation room, the policewoman tried to record the confession, but Shinfei looked indifferent. After tearing up the transcript, he casually asked to make a phone call. Seeing his arrogance, the policewoman could no longer tolerate it and tried to teach him a lesson, but Shinfei easily resolved it. During the fight between the two, Shinfei jokingly teased, You are so excited, are you attracted to me? The policewoman was so angry that her face turned blue, but Shinfei was obviously not someone she could easily deal with. She secretly hated that this guy was too difficult to deal with, and she was actually fooled around by him. Facing this bastard who made people angry and helpless, Bai Jing swore that she would make him pay the price today. Chapter 15 were not finished. The confrontation between Shinfei and Bai Jing intensified in the interrogation room. As a police officer, Bai Jing's skin was slightly dark due to long-term exposure to the wind and sun, which made her feel resentful. Especially when Shin Fei deliberately exposed her scars, her anger became more and more difficult to suppress. Bai Jing punched Shin Fei in the face, but Shin Fei easily defused it. He even desperately pressed Bai Jing under him and took advantage of her. At this moment, the door of the interrogation room suddenly opened, and a police officer accidentally broke in and witnessed this ambiguous scene awkwardly. I didn't see anything. You guys continue." The police officer left awkwardly, while Bai Jing was so ashamed and angry that tears welled up in her eyes. Shin Fei loosened his hand upon seeing this, but Bai Jing took the opportunity to knock Shin Fei to the ground with a punch. In the subsequent interrogation, Bai Jing suppressed her anger and tried to bring Shin Fei to justice, but Shin Fei calmly made a phone call and was released unconditionally soon after. This made Bai Jing feel deeply wary of Shin Fei's background. Just as Shin Fei was being released, Su Lianqing unexpectedly appeared at the police station and expressed her willingness to testify. Shin Fei asked about her child's condition with concern, which made Su Lianqing feel warm in her heart. She told Shin Fei that the child would be taken care of by a neighbor for the time being. The two chatted about each other's names, and Shin Fei introduced himself. "My name is Shin Fei." Although he had the urge to tell her more, he found it difficult to say the words. In the end, Bai Jing received an order from her superiors and had to release Shin Fei, but her hatred for this man did not diminish. Before leaving, she coldly warned, "Shin Fei, we haven't settled our accounts yet?" Shin Fei chuckled and responded, "It's my honor to be remembered by a beauty like Officer Bai." Bai Jing's inner anger grew stronger, and she swore that she would get back at him sooner or later. Chapter 16 Bar Conflict. Shin Fei and Su Lianqing walked out of the police station together. Su Lianqing tentatively asked Shin Fei if he had been to Shanghai before, but Shin Fei denied it. Although Su Lianqing was confused, she still invited Shin Fei to dinner to express her gratitude. Shin Fei declined the invitation and left quickly, making an excuse that he had something to do. He was aware of Su Lianqing's suspicion. As night fell, Shin Fei strolled under the neon lights of the city, feeling alienated from the city. He knew that even though he had seen his long-lost daughter and Su Lianqing, he still couldn't be honest with them. Finally, he returned to Ouyang Cheng's home and met Ouyang Feifei and her friend Jiang Mingming. The two girls looked expectant. Jiang Mingming invited Shin Fei to go to the bar together. Although Shin Fei had some doubts, he still agreed. In the bar, Shin Fei noticed Luo Ningyan drinking alone and felt her loneliness, but he did not approach her to talk. However, the atmosphere in the bar gradually became dangerous, and Jiang Mingming was harassed by a group of drunks because of her dancing. When a drunk tried to attack Jiang Mingming, Shin Fei immediately stood up to rescue her. Jiang Mingming fought back wittily, but the situation escalated quickly. A dozen drunks surrounded her, aggressively. Shin Fei protected the two girls behind him. Faced with a situation where he was outnumbered by the enemy, he remained calm and prepared to face the coming storm. At this moment, Ouyang Feifei's heart was filled with complex emotions. She suddenly realized that this man whom she usually hated was so reliable at the critical moment. Shin Fei's back made her feel unprecedented sense of security, and Shin Fei secretly made up his mind that no matter what, he would not let them get hurt. Shin Fei smiled lightly and slapped Ouyang Feifei and Jiang Mingming on the head respectively. He left with a laugh in the angry gazes of the two girls, leaving them covering their heads helplessly and mumbling as they went into the bedroom. Ouyang Cheng looked at Shin Fei awkwardly. He knew that what happened tonight was not simple, especially the part at the police station. Finally, Ouyang Cheng couldn't help but say, "Don't take what happened today to heart." Shin Fei smiled calmly and took a puff of cigarette. "Why should I blame you? If it weren't for you, I would still be in the police station. I am just a toothless tiger now. I am too lazy to bother with it." Ouyang Cheng felt sad when he heard this. He was once a hero, but now he was so lonely. "However, there is something I have never told you," Shin Fei suddenly spoke, breaking the silence. "What's the matter?" Ouyang Cheng asked. "Do you know why I came to Shanghai?" Shin Fei said slowly, 5 years ago, I came here and saved a woman in the bar. We had a child. That woman now works at Manhwa International." Ouyang Cheng was stunned and filled with emotion. He had wanted to introduce his daughter to Shin Fei, but now it seems that the plan has failed. "I didn't expect that you have a child. I just found out about this recently," Shin Fei sighed. "I owed them mother and daughter for 5 years, but I still don't have the courage to acknowledge them." Ouyang Cheng nodded, but the phone rang at this time. He picked up the phone, and it was Yang Yan's brother who asked to see him, and specifically mentioned that Shin Fei should come along. Ouyang Cheng looked at Shin Fei and asked for his opinion. Shin Fei smiled indifferently. "Go ahead. I'm not interested in getting entangled with them. He had no good feelings towards the Yang family and was unwilling to waste time on meaningless socializing. Ouyang Cheng nodded in agreement. The two of them tacitly understood that Shen Fei's current situation did not allow him to cause trouble, but if someone forced him to take action, he would not show mercy.
第17章 Suburbs.
Shen Fei didn't care how Ouyang Cheng handled the matter. To him, it was just a small episode in life. Ouyang Feifei was still indifferent to him, obviously dissatisfied because she didn't let him suffer a loss last night. Jiang Mingming was still quirky, with a cunning look in her eyes. After breakfast in the morning, Shen Fei got into Yao Ruoshue's car out of habit. Yao Ruoshue seemed to have acquiesced to this arrangement. Although her attitude was still cold, Shen Fei could sense that she was gradually getting used to his presence. The relationship between the two became subtle and no longer as tense and confrontational as it was at the beginning. However, Ouyang Feifei did not stop her mischief. She threw a few banana peels in front of the door, intending to embarrass Shen Fei, but was accidentally stepped on by Ouyang Cheng. Although Shen Fei spoke well of her, Ouyang Cheng still scolded her harshly. Seeing her father's anger, Ouyang Feifei bowed her head and admitted her mistake, but she was obviously unwilling to accept it. Her resentment towards Shen Fei seemed to deepen. On the way to Tianxue International, Yao Ruoshue received a call. Her originally calm face suddenly became gloomy, and then she asked Shen Fei to turn around. The car drove to the suburbs and stopped in front of a villa. Shen Fei noticed that Yao Ruoshue was in a low mood, and silently followed her into the villa. In the villa, Yao Ruoshue faced her father and an old man named Chenbo. The two were talking about Yao Ruoshue's marriage, and it seemed that everything had been arranged without considering her wishes. Anger and grievance intertwined on Yao Ruoshue's face, and she finally chose to leave angrily. Shen Fei stood aside, looking at Yao Ruoshue's back, and his heart moved slightly. He suddenly realized that the person he had never met might be himself. Yao Ruoshue walked to the cliff, tears blurring her vision. She cried out in pain, questioning why fate had forced her into such a situation. Shen Fei stood silently behind her, gently put on her coat, and said, "There are some things we cannot choose, but despair and escape are never the solution to problems." Yao Ruoshue looked up at him, with a flash of surprise in her eyes. She had never thought that this seemingly cynical man would say such profound words. She asked softly, "Shen Fei, do you have an ideal?" Shen Fei smiled calmly, "Yes. My ideal is to live like a pig every day, simple and worry-free." Yao Ruoshue forced a smile. It's better to be a salted fish. She suddenly found that Shen Fei's face was full of vicissitudes and deepness that were difficult to conceal, which made her re-examine this man. It seemed that he was not joking. Di Shibajang at the banquet. Shen Fei turned around and looked at the breathtakingly beautiful Yao Ruoshue. Even though her face was covered with traces of tears, she was still as stunningly beautiful as ever. "From what you said, the other party should be from a wealthy family, a powerful family. A wealthy lady? Are you not tempted at all?" Shen Fei asked Yao Ruoshue. "A young lady from a wealthy family?" Yao Ruoshue sneered. "If I, Yao Ruoshue, want to make money, I can go and earn it myself. If I want to live the life I want, I can pursue it myself. Why should I be a canary in a cage?" Yao Ruoshue said disdainfully. "Yes, you have ambition. In the end, people have to rely on themselves to live. Things that you rely on others are not yours after all. Tell them boldly, 'Go to hell with you. Young lady, I won't marry you.'" Shen Fei said to Yao Ruoshue. Yao Ruoshue couldn't help but laugh when she heard that, and the sadness on her face was also washed away a lot. "You always speak in such a vulgar way, but you are right, I won't marry you," Yao Ruoshue yelled. "But after venting, I still feel sad, because it was my father's decision after all. Even though this era is open and arranged marriages are rare, the decision of parents is still of utmost importance." At this time, Shen Fei jumped high like a nimble monkey, then landed on the ground and dived into the grass. Yao Ruoshue looked at this scene with a hint of amusement in her eyes. Is this guy trying to make her happy? At this time, Shen Fei poked his head out from the grass, with a piece of grass in his mouth and a fat and lively rabbit in his hands. "We have delicious food to eat. In fact, when people are in a bad mood, having a delicious meal is undoubtedly the happiest thing," Shen Fei said with a smile. "Okay, this rabbit is too fat, it should be roasted," said Yao Ruoshue. Shen Fei smacked his lips, holding the rabbit. "It's fat. Has it offended people? In fact, being too fat is also a sin." Yao Ruoshue couldn't help laughing as she watched Shen Fei muttering to the rabbit. The two men walked down the mountain, walked to the river, and made a fire. Shin Fei skinned the fat rabbit clean. When it comes to the ability to survive in the wild, if Shin Fei is second, no one dares to say he is first. After building a fire and lighting it, Shin Fei picked up a pointed piece of wood, walked to the river, and went straight into the water. Yao Ruoxue curiously followed Shin Fei to the river, only to see Shin Fei standing in the river with his eyes moving. Then, the pointed wood in his hand suddenly stabbed out, and a big carp, alive and kicking, struggled on the wood. Great! Hey, there's one more. Yao Ruoxue clapped her hands in praise. Shin Fei followed Yao Ruoxue's finger and saw another huge creature. The sharp wood in his hand flew out again. 2 big fat carps and a fat rabbit. Smoke from the cooking stove rose up. Shin Fei built a rack with damp wood and sat down. Seeing Yao Ruoxue standing there, Shin Fei took off his clothes and spread them on the ground. Thinking about it carefully, Yao Ruoxue was also a poor person who could not even control her own destiny. You want to marry her without even meeting that man once. What does marriage mean to a woman? It goes without saying. According to Miss Ouyang's logic, Shin Fei is absolutely unforgivable in this matter. Because of his existence, Yao Ruoxue had a fiancée. Although he knew nothing about it, the cause of the matter was ultimately his. Shin Fei pointed at the clothes and motioned Yao Ruoxue to sit down. A charming smile appeared on Yao Ruoxue's lips. This woman was so beautiful that no one dared to look directly at her. In fact, from this point of view, the old man still favored him. At least, he didn't just find a woman and let her have a child with him. Yao Ruoxue lifted her skirt and sat down with her legs hugged. Looking at Shin Fei flipping the freshly roasted rabbit and 2 fish with ease, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth.
Shin Fei, do you blame me?
Yao Ruoxue asked Shin Fei. Why blame you? Shin Fei grinned. Your salary is set so low. By the way, you have a daughter, right? Yao Ruoxue asked, recalling the scene when they met on the plane. Haha. Shin Fei shook his head and smiled without saying anything. Actually, when you're serious, you're not annoying at all. Yao Ruoxue said. From the very beginning when they met, Yao Ruoxue was bullied by this guy. It was only recently that she managed to get back at him. However, it seemed like an unfair victory. Actually, this guy isn't that annoying. Sometimes when I think about it, it's actually quite ridiculous. Why can't you be serious? Yao Ruoxue held her cheek, looked at Shin Fei, and said softly. A breeze blew by, and a strand of messy hair fell on Yao Ruoxue's forehead. This scene is so stunningly beautiful. Shin Fei turned his head away gently. This woman's charm was sometimes really hard to resist. Actually, I have so many advantages. If I were a little more serious, I'm afraid you would fall in love with me. Shin Fei touched his chin and said narcissistically. Poochie. Yao Ruoxue couldn't help laughing. I just praised you, and you start to act inappropriately again. Yao Ruoxue said unhappily. Shin Fei chuckled and turned the rabbit over. Oil was already bursting out of the surface of the rabbit, and the aroma was overflowing. Have you ever thought about what if your fiancé whom you have never met is a handsome guy, or a young handsome man? Shin Fei said with a smile. Yao Ruoxue couldn't help but sneer at this. Do you think 2 people who have never met each other can live happily together without any understanding of each other? Yao Ruoxue sneered. It's okay to fall in love after marriage. Shin Fei said with a smile. Humph, come on, that's not called love, that's called a contract. Yao Ruoxue said unhappily. Shin Fei shrugged and was speechless. Okay, I'll give you the rabbit leg and a fish. Shin Fei said with a smile. It smells so good. Yao Ruoxue said with admiration. She didn't mind Shin Fei's distribution at all. Her appetite could only take this much. Hey, be careful of the heat. Shin Fei exclaimed as he watched Yao Ruoxue, reaching out to grab the rabbit leg. Stupid girl, can you touch a freshly roasted rabbit with your hands? Wait for me. Seeing Yao Ruoxue's pitiful appearance, Shin Fei cried out that he couldn't stand it anymore. He took a step and ran towards the mountain. Then, he picked a few large leaves from a big tree, took them to the river, washed them with water, and said, well, wrap them with it. Shin Fei tore off a rabbit leg, wrapped it in leaves, and handed it to Yao Ruoxue. Your hand? Yao Ruoxue looked at Shin Fei. I'm thick-skinned and it's okay. Shin Fei shook his head. It was the first time that Yao Ruoxue looked carefully at a man's hands. There were thick calluses on his palms and tiny scars all over the back of his hands. It was hard to describe what kind of hands these were. Looking at this man with an honest smile, Yao Ruoxue suddenly felt a little distressed. Shin Fei tore off another rabbit leg, wrapped it with leaves, and then began to show his true foodie nature, holding the rabbit in both hands and devouring it. Seeing Shinfei eating so happily, Yao Ruoxue was not willing to lag behind. After 2 rabbit legs entered her stomach, Yao Ruoxue found that she could not eat anymore. Looking at the fragrant grilled fish in front of him, he looked helpless. Shinfei naturally had no habit of throwing away food, so he finished the 2 grilled fishes. The 2 looked at each other, pointed at each other, and laughed at the same time. Yao Ruoxue took out a tissue from her bag, and Shinfei subconsciously reached out and wiped the residue from the corner of Yao Ruoxue's mouth. The 2 people's actions, at this moment, were in amazing tacit understanding. Yao Ruoxue finally felt Shinfei's hand, which was heavy, rough, but warm. Their eyes met. Yao Ruoxue avoided his gaze, and Shinfei smiled indifferently. President Yao, you have been absent from work for half a day. Are you planning to continue to degenerate? Shinfei said with a smile. Yao Ruoxue couldn't help but smile when she heard this. Since when did you, a bodyguard, dare to meddle in my affairs? Yao Ruoxue said with a stern face. Can you not deduct my salary? Shinfei asked pitifully. You don't have to deduct it, but the grilled fish has gone into your stomach, so you owe me a grilled fish. Whenever I want to eat it, you have to grill it for me. Yao Ruoxue said. Shinfei shrugged helplessly. Are you women all irrational? Just now, he looked so sad and heartbroken. How come he was revived with full health after eating 2 rabbit legs? Shinfei suspected that the real reason why this woman was sad might be because she didn't have breakfast in the morning, and then when she returned home, no one cared for her. Yao Ruoxue looked at Shinfei's helpless expression and chuckled. Let's go. As you said, if we don't compromise, we have to learn to fight. However, no matter what, we still have to go on, right? Yao Ruoxue said. Shinfei shrugged and said nothing. The 2 of them went down the mountain, got in the car, and drove all the way back to the company. No one was surprised. After all, Shinfei was Yao Ruoxue's bodyguard. Besides, no matter how you looked at it, there couldn't be anything going on between Yao Ruoxue and Shinfei. Thank you for today. After Shinfei was about to dive into his own little house, Yao Ruoxue whispered behind Shinfei. This was the first time she looked this man in the eye, and suddenly she discovered that this man seemed to be good at many things, such as racing, barbecuing, and fighting. The most important thing is, the care and concern shown at that moment made Yao Ruoxue's heart beat fast. She never minded the difference in status, position, and wealth. If this man didn't have a daughter, Yao Ruoxue felt that she might fall in love with this man. Of course, it's just a thought. She knew that all of that was impossible. It's just like her engagement, which can't be terminated just because she wants to. Shinfei was stunned for 3 seconds. You are so polite. I am not used to it. If you really want to thank me, I can accept it reluctantly. Nothing else is needed, just a salary increase. Shinfei laughed. You cooked a barbecue for me, and most of it went into your stomach. You then served me a bowl of chicken soup for the soul, and you think you can cheat me out of my money? How dare you? Yao Ruoxue looked at Shinfei with disdain. Shinfei smacked his lips. This woman was really good at destroying bridges after crossing them. Looking at Shinfei's dejected look, Yao Ruoxue felt secretly proud. Well, I can lend you the computer for 2 days, but you are not allowed to shout or yell anymore. It makes people restless. Yao Ruoxue said. She also saw that this guy did nothing all day and looked so pitiful. After all, it's not easy to spend every day alone, staring blankly and waiting for time to pass. Besides, it seems now that this guy is not that annoying. He is just a little bit talkative. Looking at the kid's happy smile, Yao Ruoxue couldn't help but smile. In fact, sometimes, knowing how to be content is a kind of happiness, like this bastard in front of me. 第19章 3 Women, 1 Drama. Shinfei was waiting for Yao Ruoxue downstairs, and soon her college classmate Wu Hao came in. This man, dressed in a well-fitting suit and with a gentle smile, gave people a feeling of being bathed in spring breeze. Ruoxue, would you like to have dinner together tonight? Wu Hao asked with a smile. Yao Ruoxue was about to agree, but she saw Shinfei standing outside the office door, staring at them with an unhappy look on his face. She chuckled, turned to Wu Hao and said, Sorry, I have something to do today. Let's do it another day? Wu Hao looked a little disappointed, but he still maintained his composure. Okay, see you another day? After going downstairs, Shinfei followed Yao Ruoxue and asked with a frown, Did that guy want to chase you? How do you talk like that? Yao Ruoxue glared at him helplessly. He looks like a wannabe gigolo. Shinfei continued to complain. Yao Ruoxue shook her head speechlessly. He is my college classmate, not what you think. Oh, so that means clinging to someone powerful? Shinfei continued to sarcastically ask. Just as they were leaving, Wu Hao suddenly appeared, his face livid. He suppressed his anger and asked with a smile, "Who is this?" "I'm her bodyguard." Shinfei responded with a sneer. "Hello, Mr. Bodyguard." Wu Hao emphasized the word bodyguard, as if he wanted to belittle Shinfei. Not willing to be outdone, Shinfei responded, "Hello, Mr. Pretty Boy." Then, the two shook hands. Shinfei secretly increased his strength, and Wu Hao's face immediately turned blue. When leaving, Shinfei laughed and said, "This guy either has ulterior motives or is just a coward. He is not suitable for you." Yao Ruoxue thought about it, and actually felt that what he said made some sense. After returning home, Shinfei volunteered to cook a sumptuous dinner in exchange for a bounty of 1,000 yuan. While enjoying the food, the three girls praised Shinfei's cooking skills. After dinner, Jiang Mingming suggested going out to digest the food, but Yao Ruoxue made the final decision and decided to take Shinfei with her. Shinfei had no choice but to pray that he would not cause any more trouble this time. But he didn't know that several girls were already secretly planning their next move, and he was apparently going to be their target again. 20 Provocation. In a high-end billiard hall, Shinfei and three beauties had an interesting night out. However, Jiang Mingming and Ouyang Feifei's little trick behind the scenes gradually made the situation delicate. Yao Ruoxue and her group were immersed in the game, but a group of young dandies suddenly broke in. The leader, Yang Yunxi, was unwilling to be left out and provocatively asked to compete with Shinfei. Facing Yang Yunxi's challenge, Shinfei accepted it calmly and agreed to bet 10,000 per ball. After the game started, Shinfei showed amazing billiard skills and quickly hit 6 balls, which instantly made Yang Yunxi's smug look disappear. However, when Shinfei asked Yang Yunxi provocatively, "Which hole should the black 8 go into?" Yang Yunxi chose the most difficult ball without hesitation. The whole audience held their breath and concentrated, and Shinfei's every shot was extremely accurate. In the end, he hit the black 8 perfectly into the right middle hole in front of everyone's unbelievable eyes. Shinfei smiled faintly and said to Yang Yunxi, "Since you said so, as you wish." Shinfei looked at the ball, and the lazy look in his eyes finally began to become serious. Looking at Yang Yunxi, a faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "If that's the case, as you wish, after all, I can't take your 70,000 yuan for nothing." 21. Perverse Logic. As soon as he finished speaking, Shinfei swung the club cleanly and decisively. Under the gaze of everyone, the black ball slowly rolled on the table. Looking at the arc, Yang Yunxi sneered. This black ball could not enter the hole no matter what. Even Yao Ruoxue, Ouyang Feifei, and Jiang Mingming stood up and watched this scene with anticipation. After seeing the trajectory of the black ball, they all showed a look of disappointment. But he saw Shinfei lighting a cigarette with a calm face. "This guy is so pretentious." Looking at Shinfei, a guy said with disdain. At this moment, something strange happened. The white ball bounced up, spinning and hitting the black ball, instantly changing the trajectory of the black ball. Then, the black ball gently slid into the pocket. "Crap! Holy crap! This is amazing!" someone exclaimed. Under Yang Yunxi's dull gaze, the three girls all let out a cry of joy. Even Yao Ruoxue could no longer remain calm. Then, after realizing her own gaffe, Yao Ruoxue couldn't help but glare at Shinfei. "This bastard. Why does he have to play with heartbeats for no reason? Uncle, you are so handsome." At this moment, Jiang Mingming instantly became a crazy fan. "This guy is so awesome," someone said. Shinfei looked at Yang Yunxi, who was in shock, and asked, "Do you want to play more?" "Fuck, how can we play this?" Yang Yunxi smacked his lips. However, he had been told in advance that even if his family was rich, there was no way to lose like this. This guy in front of him was simply amazing. Yang Yunxi looked at Ouyang Feifei for help. When Ouyang Feifei saw Yang Yunxi's gaze, she felt a little reluctant. After all, this was not a chance encounter. If she hadn't posted a status here and displayed the location information, how could Yang Yunxi come? After all, she wanted to use Yang Yunxi. Now, seeing that Yang Yunxi was forced into an embarrassing situation by Shinfei, he couldn't help but feel a little soft-hearted. "Forget it, let's stop playing and go," said Ouyang Feifei. Yao Ruoxue nodded slightly. When doing things, one should leave a way out. There is no need to leave no wiggle room and force the other party into a dead end. That would easily lead to enmity. Hearing this, Yang Yunxi breathed a sigh of relief. "Wait." Seeing the three women preparing to turn around and leave, Shinfei spoke at this time. "Where's the money?" Shinfei laughed. The three women were speechless, and Yang Yunsi also breathed a sigh of relief. He thought that this guy was not going to let him go. It's just 70,000 yuan. There's no reason for Yang Yunsi to default on the debt. Let's go get it together.
Yang Yunsi sighed.
Shinfei drove Yao Ruoshue's car, while Yang Yunsi and others got into a Maybach. The two cars were driving under the night sky of Shanghai. Yang Yunsi was driving the car, and the Maybach let out an angry roar and sped past Shinfei's Mercedes-Benz. If you want to get the money, follow me. Yang Yunsi sneered in his heart. How could Yang Yunsi feel good after being slapped in the face by an unknown guy? It's just that Jiang Mingming and Ouyang Feifei are around, so I just don't want to lose my composure. This guy wants to run away? Looking at the speeding Maybach, Shinfei smacked his lips and said lightly. The three girls laughed when they heard this. Yang Yunsi could not do such a thing as refusing to pay his debt, but it was a provocation. Uncle, can you overtake him? Jiang Mingming said from behind, as if she was afraid that the world would not be in chaos. Shinfei scratched his head and looked at Yao Ruoshue with an embarrassed expression. Yao Ruoshue smiled secretly in her heart. This kid is becoming more and more obedient. Wait a moment, I'll fasten my seatbelt, Yao Ruoshue said lightly. She knew too well what this kid looked like when he went crazy. In order to avoid being abused by this guy again, Yao Ruoshue decided to fasten her seatbelt. Hearing this, Shinfei chuckled and waited for Yao Ruoshue to fasten her seatbelt. Jiang Mingming and Ouyang Feifei were speechless. Was this really necessary? Let's start. Shinfei grinned. The car suddenly made a loud roar, and the speedometer needle began to spin rapidly. The car, which was driving slowly just now, seemed to be stepping into the clouds at this moment. Shinfei looked at Yao Ruoshue at this time, but saw that this woman had her eyes closed. She laughed secretly in her heart. It was obvious that Yao Ruoshue was still frightened, but the girl Jiang Mingming was shouting and yelling as if she was afraid that the world would not be in chaos. It's a pity that this girl is not a boy, otherwise, she must be a little playboy. Compared to Jiang Mingming, Ouyang Feifei looked much more pitiful. One hand was tightly gripping the handle of the bike, and her pretty face was extremely pale. Damn, this kid is such a coward, Yang Yunsi said lightly as Shinfei's car disappeared from sight in the blink of an eye. No, young Master Yang, they're catching up. A guy sitting in the passenger seat looked at Yang Yunsi and said with horror. Through the rearview mirror, under the night sky, a car was extremely eye-catching, as fast as lightning. The headlights directly penetrated the night sky. A hint of coldness flashed in Yang Yunsi's eyes. He exerted a little force with his feet, and the Maybach made a loud roar and sped away. There was a faint smile on Shinfei's face. As he looked at the speeding Maybach, his expression was confident and assertive. 5 minutes later, Yang Yunsi's face changed when he looked through the rearview mirror. The Mercedes was still following not far away. 10 minutes later, Yang Yunsi cursed the man viciously as a lunatic. Although Mercedes-Benz has top performance, it is probably much worse than Maybach. Moreover, the car that Yao Ruoshue owns is just an ordinary Mercedes-Benz. But even so, Shinfei followed the Maybach closely for 10 minutes without falling behind at all. Yang Yunsi even suspected that if this guy hadn't let him lead the way, he might have surpassed him long ago. Yang Yunsi was a little angrily, so he parked his car in front of a bank on the roadside. He passed by several banks without stopping, just wanting to provoke the other party. However, now it seems that if he continues, he will be the one to be embarrassed. After Yang Yunsi stopped the car, he saw that the Mercedes driven by Shinfei did not slow down at all and rushed directly towards them. Fuck, this guy is crazy. Several people fled in a panic in an instant. When it was about to hit the Maybach, the Mercedes-Benz stopped steadily, only 10 centimeters away from the Maybach. This is a madman, and what a madman who knows how to have fun. I was just joking with you. Look how scared you are. Shinfei stuck his head out of the car window, looked at the little dandies and grinned. Yangwei, go get the money. What's wrong? Can't you walk? Shinfei grinned. Yang Yunsi rolled his eyes speechlessly. This bastard was really mean. However, Shinfei was right. His legs were really numb. He was frightened by this bastard. Yang Yunsi signaled with his eyes to a guy next to him that he should not turn hostile, as if he did, he would be suspected of taking the opportunity to cause trouble. It's too embarrassing to tell anyone about it. However, it's different for others. It's because of this bastard that he wants to play with heartbeats. Boy, you scared me. Shouldn't you compensate me for mental damage? A person next to Yang Yunsi walked up to Shinfei and said coldly. They could tolerate being slapped in the face because they were not as skilled as others. However, It was too embarrassing to be bullied by an unknown guy when they didn't even know the other person's background. Sun Tingwei, do you want to default on your debt? Yang Yunsi, you can't afford to lose, can you? Jiang Mingming was fed up when she saw this scene. After all, Shinfei came out with her. How could he be bullied like this? Most importantly, she knew the personalities of these bastards too well. Shameless, dark, and cruel. Even Ouyang Feifei's eyes when she looked at Yang Yunsi had changed. Well, she looked down on him. Looking at him, it seems that he is not as pleasing to the eye as Shinfei. Even though this guy is a little annoying, at least he is fair and reasonable and will not deny his mistakes. This is young Master Sun's business. I don't want to default on my debt. I will naturally give you the money. Yang Yunsi shrugged and said indifferently. What son? I can't remember, so I'll just call you grandson. Shinfei said, pointing at Sun Tingwei. Puff. Yao Ruoxue, who had just taken a sip of water, spat out the water. Then, she quickly picked up a tissue to wipe it. Her shoulders were shaking violently. This guy is hopeless. Other surnames are Yang, but he calls them Yang Wei. Other surnames are Sun, but he calls them grandson. His mouth is so mean. Jiang Mingming was much more exaggerated, holding her stomach and laughing uncontrollably. This uncle is so handsome and also so mean. Even Ouyang Feifei couldn't help laughing. You want compensation for your mental damage? How do you want compensation? Shinfei asked. Whose grandson are you talking about? Sun Tingwei looked at Shinfei and said angrily. Let's not talk about this for now. Let's talk about the compensation. How do you compensate? Shinfei asked indifferently. I'll settle this account with you later. Since you scared me, just compensate me with 18 million, that's all. Sun Tingwei sneered. Isn't he my grandson? Why does he become my father again? Shinfei blinked. Fuck, who said not to mention it? Sun Tingwei looked furious. As for the three girls, they were already laughing so hard. They didn't think that Shinfei would suffer any loss at all. So, everyone was standing aside, watching the fun. It seems that as long as this kid is around, there is no lack of joy, of course, provided that he doesn't make trouble for you. You scared me just now. How about you pay me 18 million and let the matter be exposed? Sun Tingwei said coldly. Upon hearing this, Shinfei opened the car door and got out. Standing in front of Sun Tingwei, are you blackmailing me? Everyone was speechless and rolled their eyes, thinking that this guy was going to do something shocking. I didn't expect that he was such a coward. Sun Tingwei looked at Shinfei with a sneer on his face, as if to say, I'm just blackmailing you. What can you do to me? What if I don't give it to you? Shinfei said lightly. Then I won't give you mine either. Yang Yunsi interrupted. If this guy can refuse to pay, why can't he? Although it's a bit mean, but in this world, the one with the bigger fist is the real boss. I'm sorry, this isn't possible, because in this world, no one can owe me a debt and not pay it back. Shinfei sneered. If you ask him to pay compensation, of course he doesn't have it. He absolutely won't refuse to pay what is owed to him. He is counting on the 70,000 yuan to get out of poverty. These words made the three girls roll their eyes. Where did this guy get this perverted logic from? I can refuse to pay you what you owe me, but no one can owe me what I owe you. This reason, this way of thinking about the world, is really powerful. Of course, they did not deny that what these guys did was extremely despicable. Yao Ruoxue just watched the matter coldly. Except for the time when this guy suffered a little loss due to the joint efforts of her and Luo Ningyan, she had never seen him suffer a loss at the hands of anyone. As for the little witch Jiang Mingming, she only felt that Shinfei's figure was extremely tall, and Shinfei's work was exactly to her liking. This was how Shinfei should deal with these brats. At this time, Ouyang Fei frowned slightly. She was a little worried that Shinfei would make a big deal out of this matter and cause trouble for her father. Chapter 24 Sister Yao. Fuck, this kid really thinks he's someone important. In Shanghai, it's rare to find someone who dares to speak like this. Boy, where did you come from? The disdainful voices of several people rang in Shinfei's ears. Shinfei narrowed his eyes slightly. Now, I just ask you if you will give me the money? So what if you don't give it to me? Sun Tingwei sneered. If you don't give it to me, it's very simple. I'll strip you naked and throw you all to stand on the curb. Shinfei laughed. I said, no one can owe me anything. Now, I'll count a 1, 2, 3. Shinfei smiled, then stretched out a finger and uttered a syllable. This guy is so filthy, I can't bear to look at him. The little girl covered her eyes, looking helpless. As for Yao Ruoxue, she turned her head away. She knew that this guy was definitely capable of doing such a thing. Of course, This guy probably never thought about the consequences. Ouyang Feifei was speechless. She knew that this guy would definitely do this as long as they didn't give him money. However, this would completely offend him. She really wanted to make this guy suffer, but she felt that it would be more likely that her old man would come out to settle the matter. Yang Yunsi, don't say I didn't remind you. He was not kidding you. Ouyang Feifei said. Jiang Mingming heard this and looked at Ouyang Feifei with anger on her face. Don't say anything. Let the uncle strip them one by one and throw them on the road. How fun would that be? We can even take some photos? Ouyang Feifei was speechless. Who was it that said this guy was too dirty? Young Master Yang, don't listen to this woman. Although we are all weaklings, we are still 5 people. He is alone. I don't believe he can strip us all naked and throw us on the street. At this time, one person spoke up. If he was really threatened by this guy, he would be too ashamed to stay in this circle in the future. However, if he was really stripped by this guy, he would be even more ashamed. After that person finished speaking, Yao Ruoxue, Ouyang Feifei, and Jiang Mingming all looked at the guy who spoke with sympathy. I can't say anything else, but this guy's fighting power is absolutely overwhelming. The 3 women had all seen Shanfei take action. You know you are a worthless loser, yet you still dare to be so proud of yourself. You are stupid and hopeless. 2. Shanfei ignored the guys and continued to utter a syllable. Seeing that the guys had no intention of compromising, Shanfei turned around and looked at Yao Ruoxue. Or, you guys should leave for a while. The picture is too dirty. Don't let it pollute your eyes. Shanfei laughed. They openly bullied Yao Ruoxue and wanted to use him as a stepping stone. Now, they owe him money and instead of paying him, they want to blackmail him. Don't they know that I have no money? Shanfei would feel sorry for himself if he didn't teach those bastards a lesson. Although he also came from a big family, he looked down on those second-generation rich people who relied on their parents' support. It's okay for men to be a bit of a dandy, but there is at least one prerequisite, that is, the capital for your dandyism is earned through your own hard work. Don't go. I want to watch more. Jiang Mingming said as if she was afraid that the world would not be in chaos. Yao Ruoxue had already started the car. There's nothing to see. This kid wouldn't make such a joke when he's in his normal state. You guys are out there doing gangster things. Didn't your father teach you that you should accept defeat when you gamble and stand at attention when you get beaten? Shanfei looked at the guys and smiled coldly. Just now, whoever said I didn't dare, stand up? The other 4 people all looked at the guy who had just spoken. Well, the revolutionary team collapsed from within. Before the guy could react, Shanfei grabbed him and started tearing him apart. Shanfei didn't have the heart to unbutton his shirt. So rough, I like it. Not far away, 3 women were watching this scene in the car. They were not interested in the men's bodies, but just wanted to see if Shanfei really kept his word. Fortunately, Shanfei showed some mercy and left a pair of underwear for that guy. Now, just squat here obediently. If you dare to move, I will break one of your legs. Shanfei said coldly. It's over. This brat is causing trouble again. Sister Ruoxue, you don't do anything about him? Ouyang Feifei said helplessly. Then, he glared at Jiang Mingming who was anxious for the world to be in chaos. It's all your fault. Jiang Mingming opened her little mouth with an innocent look on her face. Actually, I think Shanfei did the right thing. If you don't teach these shameless people a lesson, next time, they will retaliate even more severely. Yao Ruoxue said lightly. When it comes to social skills, Ouyang Feifei and Jiang Mingming are naturally not as good as Yao Ruoxue. But, won't this mean we won't be enemies? Instead, it will only make the hatred bigger, Ouyang Feifei said helplessly. Yao Ruoxue frowned slightly when she heard this, then shook her head. You think this kid can't think of what you can think of? Since he did this, he must have a way to solve the problem. Just let him do it. Ouyang Feifei was speechless. When did this guy's personality become so brilliant that he actually gained Yao Ruoxue's unconditional trust? Ouyang Feifei hesitated for a moment, but still called Ouyang Chung. I didn't dare hide anything and told him the truth about what happened today. What is the Yang family doing? Have they forgotten my reminder last time? They really don't take me seriously. They can't even discipline their own children. They deserve it. Ouyang Chung said angrily on the phone. Ouyang Feifei blinked her eyes. It seemed that the rhythm was wrong. The guy who was stripped naked by Shanfei squatted on the road, with tears in his eyes, and nodded. What a shame. But he really didn't dare to run. Shanfei has demonstrated through practice that he can do what he says. Now, all I can do is keep my head down and avoid being recognized by others. When Sun Tingwei saw this, he turned and ran. As a result, he was caught by Shanfei before he could run a few steps. I don't want you to leave. No one can leave. Shinfei smiled, and then did the same. At this moment, a car quickly stopped by the roadside. Behind, several cars followed. A group of people got off the bus one after another. Something's going to happen. Yao Ruoxue cried out after seeing this scene. Young Master Yang. The guy who got off the car had an arrogant look on his face, but after seeing Yang Yunxi, he lowered his head and called out respectfully. No matter how arrogant a dog is, it has a master, and his master is the Yang family. Even though he was slapped in the face and beaten half to death, the Yang family was still his master. There was a wound on Triangle Eye's face, but that didn't stop him from going out to do his work. When Yang Yunxi saw the triangular eyes, he nodded with satisfaction. Just now, he was really oppressed by Shinfei. Now, I can finally stand up straight and live as a man. It's time for this guy to pay the price. Mr. Yang? It seems that the woman's surname is also Yang. Seeing this scene, Shinfei's eyes suddenly became playful. He's crippled. Yang Yunxi pointed at Shinfei and said coldly, they really are a family. Their styles of doing things are so similar. Shinfei smacked his lips. The man with triangular eyes finally saw Shinfei's figure clearly, and his face suddenly became extremely interesting. Last night, he was beaten and slapped in the face. It seemed that it was because of this man. It was really a narrow road for enemies to meet. However, it seems that this master is not someone he can afford to offend. Why don't you take action? Looking at Triangle Eyes standing there in a daze, Yang Yunxi said coldly, Mr. Yang this? Triangle Eyes looked at Mr. Yang in embarrassment, then dialed the phone. Boss Yang, let me tell you something. Yeah, okay, I get it. Triangle Eyes glanced at Yang Yunxi. Boss Yang said she would come in person. Are you here to stop me from doing my job? Shinfei asked. No. Triangle Eyes shook his head quickly. Although he wished he could cripple this guy, there was no doubt that after crippling this guy, he would definitely die more miserably than anyone else. Last time, he didn't die because he was an obedient dog. If a dog is disobedient as its owner, I will probably kill it without anyone else's help. Now, do you want me to do it, or do it by yourselves? Shinfei sneered. Yang family, this is the second time they have provoked him. Shinfei's temper has improved now, but that doesn't mean he can allow others to provoke him again and again. He is afraid of trouble and doesn't want to cause trouble, but once the day comes when he really causes trouble, there will be many people who cannot bear it. Yang Yunxi glanced at Shinfei with a hint of coldness in his eyes, but he took the initiative to take off his clothes, and he was aware of how tight they were. After seeing this scene, the remaining two guys stopped resisting. It's not shameful if we all do it together. Everyone has taken off their clothes, but you don't take off your own. You are attracting hatred. Although these guys are a little spoiled, they are not fools. When Shinfei saw Yao Ruoxue reversing the car, a hint of tenderness flashed in his eyes. This woman was still worried about him after all. However, there were some things he didn't want Yao Ruoxue to see. The Yang family, do you want to break off relations or compromise? This time, Shinfei really wants a result. Of course, there is no reason to let Ouyang take the blame. It is not right to always bring hatred upon others. If everything is fine, go back first. I'll give you the money tomorrow. Now I know you're a shareholder. Don't worry, I won't be the kind of person who defaults on my debts, Shinfei said with a smile. Seeing that this guy still had the mind to joke, Yao Ruoxue knew that the matter was not that serious. Besides, Ouyang should come forward, so there is really no need for her to stay here. Whose brother are you? Yao Ruoxue said unhappily. You're wrong. I'm not a brother, you're a sister. Sister Yao. Please go back first, Shinfei said with a smile. Huh? Sister Yao. Why are these two words so weird? Then, Shinfei saw Yao Ruoxue staring at him with a cold face. Ouyang Feifei and Jiang Mingming both covered their mouths, looking like they were enduring very hard. How could you, a man like you, be so rude? Then, the two women thought about their surnames, and it seemed that there was nothing that could be caught by this guy, so they couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. I said it was a slip of the tongue. Do you believe it? Shinfei said dryly with a sad face. What do you think? Yao Ruoxue asked unhappily. I don't believe it. Shinfei said helplessly. Congratulations, you guessed it right. Yao Ruoxue smiled coldly at Shinfei. At this moment, a car slowly drove over, and with it came Ouyang. The two cars were almost driving head-on. A Bentley and a Rolls-Royce. The person who got off the Bentley was the incredibly charming woman. She glanced at the scene with her charming eyes and frowned slightly. Ouyang Cheng's face was full of anger,